Her name is Megan Sanctuary, and she is one of the lecturers slash faculty in our biologic science department. And she is going to be talking to you guys about nutrition, and it's going to be a really fun topic. So take it away, Megan.
Great, thanks so much. I'm very happy to be here today and talk to you guys a little bit about nutrition, hopefully pique your interest in it, and also give you a little bit of information about the class that I teach at NKU. So today I'm going to talk about food as medicine, and it's kind of a recurring theme in my class on human nutrition that I teach in the biological sciences department. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start by giving you just a brief introduction to my background, why I became interested in nutrition. And then we're going to talk a little bit about food choices and the role of diet in chronic disease. So there's a couple different chronic diseases we're going to touch on. We're just going to do a real brief introduction to those just to get you interested. And really the main purpose of this talk is to show you how really important nutrition is for our overall health and how food actually can be medicine. So then we'll wrap up talking about some career paths in nutrition and how the biology department at NKU can help you get there. All right, so just to give you a little background on me, I actually started my career wanting to be a doctor, a medical doctor. So I enrolled in a program, an MD, PhD program, at the University of Illinois. At the University of Illinois, and I studied brain tumors for my PhD work. And I started a career, or I started learning about medicine as well. And through that process, I really actually became interested more in preventative medicine and in learning more about research. So my doctorate, all doctorates are actually in philosophy. So anyone who has a PhD is trained in a particular field. But really, as a PhD holder, you are trained in thinking. So all PhDs are trained to think and ask questions. And so that really became the focus of my career and my interest in nutrition, wanting to help people, help them with their health, but also exploring new options for this. So not just following what the recommendations are or what people generally do for health, but looking outside the box and thinking of alternatives. And really this led me into nutrition as a preventative medicine. And so I went to the University of California, Davis, and that's where I earned my PhD in nutrition. And so I'm really interested in this idea of preventing diseases before they happen rather than trying to treat them once they do happen. And obviously there's a place for that in medicine as well. But I think a focus more on preventative medicine can help our society as a whole. And so there's a saying by Benjamin Franklin that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that just basically means that you need a lot more preventative medicine to prevent a disease than you will to treat a disease once you get it. And so that's what I'm going to try to convince you of today, how important nutrition is for overall health and how you may not even consider your food choices generally throughout the day. And so I wanted to just do a quick survey and find out what all of you ate for breakfast this morning. And this can kind of open us up to talking a little bit about our food choices and why we make them. So if we can maybe run that poll real quick, we can find out what you guys ate for breakfast. So again, just choose the selection that most closely reflects what you ate. Obviously, these aren't all the choices, so we'll just see if maybe you ate more cereal and Pop-Tart type breakfast, or maybe you just had coffee or some other drink for breakfast. Yogurt and granola tends to be a choice that a lot of students choose. Maybe something more like eggs or bacon or some sort of meat product, or maybe you didn't eat breakfast at all. Okay, so I'm not seeing any responses. I don't know if maybe you're just listening.
I'm not seeing any. I'm wondering, because I know a couple of people have it, displayed in their class.
Okay, we got one.
They may be asking their students what they had and getting the results from their students.
Yeah, so we'll just focus on the first question. We'll get to the other questions a little bit later, so you don't have to worry about questions 2 quite at this point. Let's just answer the first question on the poll. All righty, so I'll just move forward. I'll just talk through the survey results, what I see on here. So it looks like we have about 20% of people eating something similar to cereal or Pop-Tarts. We have about 20% also that said coffee was their beverage of choice for breakfast. We actually have 40% showing yogurt and granola. No one eggs, and then some people had nothing. So about 20% didn't eat breakfast. So that brings us to our food choices. So why exactly do we make those food choices for breakfast? Why did you decide to eat cereal versus drinking coffee versus having yogurt? Maybe it's an idea of whether you think eating breakfast is healthy or not, or maybe you're grabbing whatever the quickest thing is to eat. If it's easier to just grab a Pop-Tart and run out the door, or maybe you're not hungry in the morning, so choose coffee. But basically just bringing up the idea that most of us don't really think about our food choices very much. We focus on affordability, on convenience, and it's probably one of lower on the list that we're thinking about the healthfulness of our breakfast choices in the morning. With all of us being so busy and having so much to do, sometimes we're not really reflecting as much on what we choose to eat, especially right away in the morning. So I'm hoping to maybe change your mind about that and maybe consider our breakfast a little bit more as we learn about some of the impacts of our food choices on our health. I'm just going to close this. Okay. So that brings me to how important these diseases are. So here I have listed the top 7 causes of death, basically, of Americans currently in the US. And so the #1 cause of death for people is heart disease. And so this keeps increasing. And so heart disease is affecting more and more of us. You may know somebody with heart disease. It might be someone in your family, your parents, or other relatives that might be affected, or maybe your friends' parents. Cancer then would be the second leading cause of death in the US currently, followed by accidents, lower respiratory diseases, which are basically infections of the lungs, stroke, which we'll talk about in a couple slides, and that's actually a form of heart disease, as well as Alzheimer's disease.
I think Megan's internet might have just cut out, so bear with us. Hopefully she'll jump right back in.
All right, sorry about that. I might have gotten kicked off. All right, sorry about that. So I was talking about the top 7 killers of Americans, so the top causes of death. And so this is why it's so important to study nutrition. So out of these 7, just kind of look through them and think about which ones you think might be relevant to nutrition, which ones might have some sort of nutritional basis. And so if we think about all these different diseases, there's actually the majority of them that have a significant nutritional component. So heart disease, cancer, stroke, and diabetes all have known causes that are nutritional in nature, while there are additional 2 that have some component of nutrition that can affect them. So like lower respiratory disease is an infectious disease, and we're going to talk about the immune system and how how nutrition is important for the immune system. So there is even a nutritional component of some of these diseases as well. So that's why it's so important to really understand and know more about nutrition than we currently do. So I'm going to start off talking about diabetes because it's kind of a gateway to some of these other diseases. So a lot of people who experience diabetes are diagnosed with diabetes, end up being diagnosed with other chronic diseases in the future, including heart disease and cancer. And so I like to talk about diabetes, and it's also really relevant to your breakfast choices. So just a really brief crash course on what diabetes is. I'm sure we've all heard of it. We all know people who've experienced it, or at least know someone who has experience with it. And so just a little bit of biology for you is, so the way that the body works is that when you eat your breakfast foods, let's say you had a bagel for breakfast, your body will break down that bagel so that it can use the nutrients in it in your body for energy. So for example, a bagel is mostly carbohydrates. And so it's mainly composed of starch, which is a bunch of sugars all linked together. So when you eat a bagel, you chew it up, it goes into your stomach and into your digestive system. Your body breaks it down, and all those sugars get broken up, and then you absorb them into your body. And so when the sugar gets into your blood, that's a way that you deliver sugar to the cells of your body so that they can have energy. So in a normal person, what will happen is that sugar will enter the blood. So someone without diabetes, the sugar will enter the blood. And so you'll see a rise in blood sugar. And so this graph is just basically showing you what happens to the level of sugar in your blood after you eat something that contains sugar. So what'll happen in a normal person is the blood sugar will go up because you just ate a bunch of sugar, and then it'll go down as the sugar gets taken up by cells in your body. And this is what's supposed to happen. But in a person with diabetes, what happens is their blood sugar goes up. So they digest all that sugar, it goes into their blood, but then it stays in their blood and it can't get into their cells the way that it's supposed to. And so it's this high level of sugar in the blood that ends up causing problems all around the body. So there's a lot of different things that can happen when there's a lot of sugar in the blood. So sugar is really sticky. So just like you kind of have experience with sugar, with candy being sticky, if you've ever gotten candy on your hands or something, you know how tacky it is. So sugar sticks to things, and it can stick to things when it's circulating in your blood as well and cause problems that way. So it can basically cause problems anywhere in the body, wherever your blood is flowing. So it can cause problems in your brain, in your nerves, in your teeth, basically anywhere in your body. And this is why people with diabetes have these symptoms, why they have kidney problems, and they might start having problems with their vision, or problems with numbness and tingling in their fingers because you lose sensation in the nerves. And so basically the overall point here is that the more sugar that you have in your blood, the worse the disease is. And so we really want to make sure that we're not having too much sugar in our blood at one time. So did you know that only 1 teaspoon, a single teaspoon of sugar, can fit in your bloodstream at one time? So when you're eating food, that's the small amount of sugar that your body can handle in your blood at one time. So how much sugar was in your breakfast? So we kind of went over all those different options. Let's see if we can figure out which of these breakfasts is the highest in sugar. So our options are a bowl of cereal, a Pop-Tart, caramel macchiato, which is this coffee drink here, yogurt and granola as pictured here, or eggs. Which do you think is the highest in sugar? Can we bring up that poll again? All right, so it looks like some people already started answering this, which is perfect. I can kind of breeze through it a little bit more quickly. And so what I'm seeing here on my screen is that we have about 17% of people thought the bowl of cereal is the highest in sugar. About half of people thought the Pop-Tart is highest. We also have about 17 and 17 for the caramel macchiato and for the yogurt and granola as well. So let's see what the correct answer is. Let me go to the next screen. All right. Sorry. Okay, So which breakfast is higher in sugar? Again, keep in mind that this is the amount that can fit in your blood at one time. Okay, so if we look at the bowl of cereal, we actually have an average of 7 to 11 teaspoons per serving of cereal. So our Lucky Charms bowl that we saw is on the higher end. That's about 11 teaspoons in just one bowl of that cereal. If we look at our Pop-Tart, we have about 7 teaspoons, and that is per pastry. So if you were to eat both Pop-Tarts at once, you'd be getting double this amount, about 14 teaspoons of sugar. If we look at our caramel macchiato, which is a fairly sugary coffee drink, we have 9 teaspoons in a grande. So that's like a medium caramel macchiato, has 9 teaspoons of sugar. And so it might actually surprise you to know that it's the yogurt and granola that is actually the highest. So if you choose low-fat yogurt products, they tend to be really high in sugar. So on average, a low-fat granola or a low-fat yogurt has 11 teaspoons of sugar in one serving. Granola actually has 6 teaspoons per serving. And you are all right on about the eggs. There's no sugar in eggs, which is perfect. And just to get you some perspective on this, if you could actually eat a Snickers bar for breakfast and it would have less sugar in it than some of these other options. So this is just to give you some perspective on our food choices that we're making for breakfast and how we want to be aware that even things that we think are healthy might not be in terms of their sugar content. So these would be some foods that people generally think are healthy for breakfast. So orange juice, it's a good source of vitamin C. It's made from fruit. It must be good. But just 1 cup of orange juice has 5 teaspoons of sugar. And most of us don't drink a cup. If you pour a glass, it's usually 2 cups. It might even be more than that. So you can very easily stack up your sugar consumption by drinking orange juice. Even healthy cereals that appear healthy, you have to be careful of and read the labels. This Great Grains product has actually 6 teaspoons of sugar per cup. And so again, if you're eating more than 1 cup, you're getting more sugar than that as well. Bran muffins, people tend to think are healthy. But if you buy a bran muffin from the store instead of making it at home, you're actually getting a whopping 8 teaspoons of sugar from just one little muffin. And that's just to start out your day. That's not talking about all the sugar that you're consuming throughout the rest of the day. So just to get you thinking a little bit more about your breakfast choices, because those choices actually, I'm sorry.
We have a question, sorry.
Okay, sure, yeah.
It's how long do we have to wait to eat each individual teaspoon of sugar? How long does it take for the sugar to get digested?
Okay, very, very good question. So it normally takes about, at the shortest amount of time, about an hour for 1 teaspoon of sugar to be taken out of your blood. It can be longer. It can be up to 2 hours, depending on your own body. But it's usually around 1 to 2 hours that it takes for a teaspoon of sugar to get out of your blood. Yep. Good question. Any other questions?
No, that was it. I just wanted to get that because it was like pertaining to what you were asking at that specific point.
Absolutely. Yep. Good question. And so we can actually control our blood sugar depending on our food choices. So this is kind of showing what a normal standard diet that's fairly high in sugar. A lot of people's diets are high in sugar, and it's not because we're trying to be unhealthy. It's because we're not aware of the sugar that's in a lot of the foods that we're eating. And so people eating just kind of a normal diet tend to eat more sugar than they're aware of. And this can really cause problems with our blood sugar. So here, this is showing how blood sugar will change over a given day. These green lines here show normal ranges of blood sugar. So if your blood sugar stays within this range, you're good to go. So it's basically showing at breakfast, if you eat something sugary like cereal or a Pop-Tart, it's going to bring your blood sugar above that normal range. So this is a high amount of sugar in your blood that can be detrimental to your health. And so if you're eating kind of these sugary foods at each meal, you're going to get these spikes in blood sugar throughout the day. And over time, that can damage your health. But there are healthy diets that you can choose that keep your blood sugar within a normal range all day long. And then you're going to prevent this risk of diabetes that you have from eating these foods. So if you want to find out more about what this healthy diet looks like, hint, it might include those eggs that no one had for breakfast. You can learn more about nutrition to figure out what this diet looks like. You can take my class. So that brings us to heart disease, because diabetes can predispose you to heart disease too. So people who have diabetes are much more likely to have heart disease later in life. So I'm just going to give you a really quick crash course on cardiovascular disease. And why your vascular system is so important. So when people talk about heart disease, we're actually talking about cardiovascular disease. Cardio meaning the heart, vascular meaning your blood vessels. So it's not really a disease of the heart so much as it is a disease of the blood vessels that carry blood all around your body. So what will happen with heart disease is that you'll slowly get this buildup of plaque in your arteries. So normally arteries are supposed to be smooth. Your blood is supposed to flow through those vessels really easily. But over time, certain factors in your environment, of your diet, of your lifestyle, can cause the buildup of this plaque. So as you can see, as the plaque builds up, it fills in the blood vessel, and it makes it harder and harder for the blood to flow through. So here you see in the late stages of heart disease, you hardly get any blood flow through some of these vessels. And that can be really problematic, because if this blood flow cuts off completely and you don't have blood flow to certain parts of the body, that can cause real problems. That is what causes stroke and heart attack. So if you get a blockage of one of these vessels and it occurs in your brain, that is a stroke. And so if part of your brain doesn't get blood, that part of the brain will die. It's not getting oxygen, it's not getting nutrients. And so you'll have problems then in your body. So wherever in the brain this happens, you might lose your ability to move certain parts of your body. You might lose the ability to speak or understand speech. So that can be really devastating for people who experience strokes. Heart attacks are similar, except instead of blockage occurring in your brain, the blockage is occurring in the vessels that supply the heart. And so if one of those vessels gets blocked, then actually die. And that patch of dead tissue, there's nothing you can do about it. It will impair your heart's ability to pump and beat and basically cause problems for the rest of your life. And so heart disease, a lot of people now are suffering from heart disease. It's becoming more and more of a problem. And so what is actually causing this to happen? So there's a lot of factors that go into plaque buildup in the arteries. A lot of them are nutritional, but some of them are also lifestyle factors, such as smoking. So smoking is a big one that can cause this plaque buildup in your arteries. But one of the main risk factors is actually high blood pressure. So this is something you might have heard your parents talking about or other people talking about. You've probably had your blood pressure measured when you go to the doctor. It's when they put the blood pressure cuff around your arm and see how it's basically a measure of how hard your heart has to pump in order to push blood around your body. So if it's harder for your heart to push blood around, that's going to set you up for heart disease. So there's a lot of things that cause high blood pressure. One of the main nutritional ones is excess sodium. So it's sort of similar to sugar, except it's a mineral. And so this mineral can increase blood pressure when you eat too much of it, similar to sugar. And on average, people consume about twice the amount of sodium that's recommended. And again, it's not because we're trying to eat unhealthy, it's because the sodium is hidden in a lot of the foods and we're not aware that it's there. So this shows our average sodium intake in America compared to what's recommended. So this is basically intake by males and females over the lifespan. So this blue dotted line here shows the recommended maximum intake of sodium we should have. And this line shows how much we actually eat. So as you can see across the lifespan, we tend to eat a lot more sodium, especially males, than is recommended. And so what food choices are leading to that. What did you have for lunch, or what will you have for lunch after this talk? And how much sodium is in it? How could that set you up for either preventing or increasing your risk for heart disease? So let's do another quick poll question. Which lunch is highest in sodium? So again, sodium being a mineral, being part of salt, which of these do you think is highest in sodium? And so let's see, I've got some answers here. It looks like we have sushi with soy sauce coming in at the highest. About half of people think sushi with soy sauce is high. And then second in line is cheese pizza, followed by ham sandwich. So let's see who's correct. So again, the recommended intake for sodium is about 1,500 milligrams. That's less than 3/4 of a teaspoon. So it's a very small amount of sodium that we actually need. So let's first take a look at our cheese pizza. So each slice has about 700 milligrams of sodium. If you ate 2 slices of pizza, that's 1,400 milligrams, which is almost 100%. That's 93% of the sodium that you would need in one day in just one meal. So you're basically hitting what you need with just one meal in that day. If we look at a ham sandwich, it's similar. So you get about 1,100 milligrams from the ham, and there's actually sodium in the bread as well. So, I mean, that's a source of hidden sodium. So generally bread doesn't taste salty, but when food manufacturers make bread, they add sodium as a preservative. And so if you were to eat a ham sandwich, that's almost, again, 100% of your daily recommended intake. If we look at our sushi with soy sauce, the sushi itself isn't actually very high in sodium, only about 200 milligrams for the fish and all the rice. The soy sauce, however, is extremely high in sodium, about 900 milligrams for a tablespoon. So if you were to eat more soy sauce than that, you could really amp up this level as well. Finally, we have teriyaki chicken. That is very high in sodium as well. And again, the sauce is the main contributor of that, as well as the chicken itself. And so chicken that's prepared at restaurants tends to be higher in sodium. And so you'd get 100% of your sodium needs just from the lunch here. And then finally, vegetable soup is our winner today. So this is, again, a hidden source of sodium. You know, we know that soups are salty, but if you buy a soup from a restaurant or from the store, they tend to be very, very high in sodium. So 2 cups of vegetable soup will put you over your recommended intake for a day, just with a single bowl of soup. So what do we do about this? Where does all the sodium come from? Why is there so much sodium in all of these foods? Well, the fact is that most of the sodium that we eat actually is already in processed and prepared foods. So again, if we're eating out at a restaurant or we're buying packaged foods, those are going to be a lot higher in sodium. So people think that, you know, we're just adding too much salt for our food, but there's a very small amount of sodium that we're actually getting, that we're adding when we're cooking. And so we don't even necessarily need to change the things that we're eating, just where we're getting them from. So for example, if you get fried chicken from a restaurant, it's going to be packed with sodium, about 2,200 milligrams for 1 8-ounce serving of this fried chicken from a restaurant. If you were to cook chicken at home, on the other hand, you're hardly going to have any sodium, and you can control how much salt that you add to your chicken. Similar for condiments. So if you buy regular ketchup, the same is true for other condiments. So we saw the teriyaki sauce, we saw the soy sauce, very high in sodium, but you can purchase low sodium versions. So studies have shown that food manufacturers don't actually need to put as much sodium in the food as they do. People can adjust to the taste with lower sodium condiments. So if we choose these at the grocery store, that can help us reduce our sodium intake. And finally, packaged foods versus cooking them at home. So a container of ramen noodles will be very high in sodium compared to if you just made home cooked noodles at home. So just cooking at home instead of eating out at restaurants or buying packaged foods can really help reduce our sodium intake. And so this map shows the incidence of preventable deaths from diseases associated with hypertension. So across the US, people are getting sick and they're dying from diseases associated with high blood pressure. So that would be heart disease, that would be strokes and heart attacks. And as you can see, the highest levels are in counties that are Black. And so Kentucky is right smack dab in the middle of all these deaths from high blood pressure. And so we really need to be concerned in our area about this particular problem. And again, all we have to do is change our food choices and we can prevent these diseases from happening. And then the final thing I wanted to go over really quickly, given the light of the current pandemic, is how vitamins can impact your susceptibility to viruses. So just a quick crash course on viruses and immunity. And so just to quickly introduce you to the immune system is basically your defense. It's your shield against all of the foreign pathogens, the bacteria, the viruses that want to get inside you and make you sick. So your immune system is always fighting for you. You're always being exposed to bacteria and viruses in your environment all the time. And so your immune system helps protect you from those, so that you generally don't even know that you're exposed to all these bacteria until you get sick. And that means that the immune system is working harder to make you better. And so there's all these different parts of the immune system that work together to fight and defend your body against all these foreign invaders. So it's important to understand that you can't avoid bacteria and viruses. They coat every single surface. They're on all the food that you eat. Even if you went through and bleached your entire house, those bacteria and viruses would be back within minutes. Even if you wash your hands all the time, there's always going to be some sort of bacteria and virus on your hands. Not saying you shouldn't do those things, but the best defense actually is to boost your immune system. That's what your immune system is there for, to defend your body and fight off all of these foreign invaders. And something you may also not know is that nutrients in the diet are the number one thing that you need in order to boost your immune system. So if there's certain foods that we can actually eat to help our immune system function better and fight off all of these things that are trying to attack us. And so I just really wanted to briefly talk about one vitamin in particular that's been associated with the coronavirus. And so vitamin D status has been shown to play a really important role on how badly you get sick if you get sick with COVID-19. And so here, this is showing how severe the disease is in people with normal vitamin D levels. So this is people who are getting enough vitamin D, and we'll talk exactly about what vitamin D is in a minute, are getting enough vitamin D. They have about the same amount of people with mild disease compared to people with severe disease. And the numbers are pretty low. If you compare that to people that are deficient in vitamin D, meaning they're not getting enough vitamin D, the incidence of having severe disease is a lot higher. So they're showing in most people with severe coronavirus that they're deficient in vitamin D. And this is a problem because getting enough vitamin D can lessen the severity of the viral infection. So it's actually protective. It can prevent you. It won't prevent you from getting the disease, but it will prevent you from getting having severe symptoms of the disease. And so this is a problem because globally, people tend to be deficient in vitamin D. So over the whole world, about 60% of people are deficient. In the US, it's closer to 40%, but it's still a good amount of people who aren't getting enough vitamin D. And so the people who are protected are in the minority. Only about a quarter of people have adequate vitamin D status that's preventing them from getting a severe COVID-19. So what did you have for dinner? Where do we get vitamin D? And so I'm just gonna kind of skip through this real quick. I'm just gonna go through the biggest reasons many people are deficient in vitamin D. Let's see what people said. Oh, good. So it looks like people are actually getting this correct, which I'm so excited to see. So let's go over these answers real quick. So let's see, they do not eat enough vegetables. Nope, most vegetables actually are not a source of vitamin D. So vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. That means that it's found mostly in the fat part of food. And so vegetables are pretty low, or don't have very much fat in them at all. And so most vegetables are not a good source of vitamin D. Let's see, some people said eat refined grains instead of whole grains. So refined grains would be things like white flour, baked goods like cookies and crackers and things that are made without whole wheat flour. Whole grains would be things like whole wheat bread, whole grain pasta, that kind of thing. So is that a reason that people eat too many refined grains? Well, no, that's actually not, because even whole grains don't contain vitamin D. Let's see, they eat too much seafood. Nope, fish is actually one of the best sources of vitamin D. So fatty fish like mackerel and herring and salmon are good sources of vitamin D. And then finally, what most people said, they stay indoors and wear sunblock. That is right. So the best source of vitamin D is sunlight. And so the best source of vitamin D is being out in the sun. But you also have to be careful depending on your skin tone. So people who have lighter skin tones don't need as much sunlight. So their skin can make vitamin D a lot more with a lot less sunlight, whereas people with darker complexions need to be outside for a little bit more time in order to make enough vitamin D. But you also want to avoid burning because burning can predispose you to diseases like skin cancer. So we need this balance of getting enough sunlight, but not getting too much. If you live in areas that don't have a lot of sunlight, or during the winter, like we're experiencing right now, you can get some vitamin D from your diet as well. And so the best sources are foods like salmon and other fish, as well as eggs are really good vitamin D, and they're low in sugar. Cheeses are good sources of vitamin D, as are some fortified dairy products. So vitamin D milk has vitamin D added to it. And so we have to, if we can be aware of our vitamin D sources, and if we just don't have access to these sources, supplementing with vitamin D can help protect us and boost our immune system, not just for coronavirus, but for a lot of other infections and other illnesses as well. Okay, and then one last final question I have is to reflect on the last time you went to the doctor. So what basically is your experience with healthcare, and what kind of treatments do your healthcare providers generally recommend to you? So when you go in, you say that you're sick, what do your doctors normally recommend for treatment? And as a student in medical school, I can say that I was personally trained mainly to give people medications. So if you go in with some sort of sickness, then there's a drug that you prescribe. So there is very little in the way of nutritional recommendations. And it's not always like this, but for the most part, that's how doctors are trained. They're trained to prescribe drugs. And so I wanted to just give you some insight into the idea of food as preventative medicine by comparing drug treatments to food treatments. So again, I'm not saying, the drugs are important and they're really necessary for a lot of different diseases. But in some cases, we might want to consider using foods first. For example, drugs are mainly used and recommended at diagnosis. So it's not until you actually have a disease that given a drug. And again, that's not all the time. There are some preventative drugs as well, but this is just kind of in general. In comparison, foods are preventative. So if you can start a good diet, especially when you're young, like you guys are in high school, you can prevent a lot of those diseases from even happening. So food is really the best preventative medicine. Drugs also assume that the body is broken. So it assumes there's something wrong with the body that the body can't fix on its own, that you have to take a drug in order to fix it. Where foods as medicine actually help the body fix itself. So it's the idea that if you give your body all the right nutrients and you don't give it too much sugar or too much sodium, that the body can actually fix itself. And so learning more about biology will help you understand how the body can do that. There's a lot of side effects of drugs, and they're very common. There are no drugs without any side effects. They can be mild, but they can also be severe. Some of them can even be debilitating. And we're at the point now where so many people take so many drugs and combinations of drugs that you actually have drugs to treat diseases caused by drugs, which I'll talk about more in a minute. On the other hand, food side effects are very uncommon unless you have some sort of food allergy or something like that. And they're generally mild. So basically, food is generally safe. There's not going to be any overdosing on strawberries, right? So food is going to be a much safer first medicine to try to prevent diseases before they happen. And they address overall health and well-being. So just eating a healthier diet is not just going to address one disease, it can address many diseases at one time that you might be experiencing. And so there's this idea in medicine that doctors should first do no harm. So this is the Hippocratic Oath. It's taken by all medical students before they become doctors. And basically, they don't want to harm anybody. And now it's becoming clear that some of these side effects of these drugs are harmful to people. So if you look at the side effects of drugs for diabetes, they all have side effects, and some of them are really bad for you. Hepatotoxicity, for example, is toxicity of the liver. And so we need to just maybe consider how we're treating some of these diseases, especially in the early stages. Same thing with cardiovascular disease drugs, can have a lot of different side effects. And these are all prescription drugs. But even drugs that we buy for our general aches and pains, like ibuprofen, has side effects. So facial swelling, asthma, rash, blisters, hives. And so obviously we don't experience these all the time, but just the idea that maybe we should be getting away from these drugs with all these side effects unless we really, really need them, and to try to use food first. There's even an entire syndrome. This is just one example of a syndrome that comes from taking certain medications. So these are more medications for mental health. So some antipsychotics, antidepressants, and things like that cause this disease called tardive dyskinesia, where people basically lose motor control of their body, especially in their face. So they can't control their lips and their facial expressions. And now they even have drugs to treat problems with drugs. So it just seems like maybe there is a better alternative for some people, especially preventatively, that, food might actually be a better medicine. And so there's a lot of different ways to get involved, a lot of different career paths in nutrition. And really, I want to make a call out to you, because you are the future of healthcare, and you are the people who are going to go into the field, get into your health profession careers, and you are going to influence how people are treated for disease, how these diseases are researched. And so it's up to you to learn more about this. And I urge you to just learn more about nutrition, learn more about these alternatives. And there's a lot of ways to do that research, actually getting into medicine. Medical doctors aren't really trained in nutrition, but naturopathic medical doctors are. But you can get into teaching. Registered dietitians are good. They give advice to patients as well. They can also teach nutrition. The route that I took is more research, but I teach as well. And so master's degree, PhD in nutrition, so you can learn more about all of these things and using nutrition as treatments for disease. And all of these paths can start with a Bachelor of Science degree at NKU. So I've included a couple of links here to the biology department and some of our programs. So with that, thank you for listening. Looks like I went a little over with time. I apologize, but I'd like to take any questions.
That was great. Thanks, Megan. And feel free to unmute yourself, or you can put them in the chat, and we can ask Megan, or she can check the chat herself. It's however she would like to do it.
Yeah, I can take a look at the chat. Okay, so we have a question in the chat. Does the level of salt and sugar recommended change depending on if you're still growing or a child? So yes, so that there are recommendations based on your age generally. And so they don't recommend hardly like any sugar at all, any added sugar at least, meaning sugar that's not naturally occurring. So like fruit and milk have naturally occurring sugar in them, but anything with added sugar, so like candy, soda, anything like that, they don't recommend for children at all until their age about 2 or 3. So they definitely recommend keeping that really low in diets for children. And then they kind of cap it in adults at about 10 teaspoons per day, which I think is too much. But that's the recommendation right now for adults is 10 teaspoons per day of added sugar. And then I got a question. You said that if you clean every surface, the germs will come back. Will they automatically be the same as before? And the answer is yes, for the most part. So whatever you're cleaning, because there's bacteria in the air, there's bacteria and viruses in the air, especially if you have the same people in the same environment. That's a good source. So you have them on your skin. So if you clean a surface, your skin can recontaminate the surface. And that's just the way that the world is. And bacteria, aren't all bad. We need bacteria on things. And we need bacteria in our bodies. Like we have a lot of bacteria in our guts, and those are good for you. So instead of the goal being to just kill everything around us, we need to make sure that we're keeping the good bacteria that we need, like in our intestines, and we're allowing our immune system to fight off the bad bacteria. The immune system is going to be way better at doing that than we are. And then I got a question when you were talking about sodium and sugar, does exercising and working out help our bodies to process them? That's a great question about whether you can kind of work out a poor diet, right? And I got that question all the time from my students. And so it's a little bit different between sodium and sugar. So there's really no effect on sodium from exercising, unless you're sweating a lot, then you might be losing a little bit of sodium, salt when you sweat, but it's not going to really be that much. In terms of sugar, so it can help a little bit with sugar. Exercising can help you burn sugar a little bit better. It helps your muscles take up sugar more effectively. And so they definitely recommend exercise for people who are pre-diabetic. It can definitely help with the way that your body processes sugar, but it's still only to an extent. So you still don't really want to overload on sugar and expect your exercise to completely cancel it out. It can definitely help, but it will not it's not the cure for a poor diet. Excellent question. I answer all those questions. Are there any follow-up questions on any of the answers that I gave? I kind of went through that quickly. Did I answer your question about the surface with the germs, Victoria? Any other questions that you guys have? How many milligrams of sugar is in 1 teaspoon? So there's 4 grams of sugar in every teaspoon. So in milligrams, that's 4,000 milligrams. So keep in mind, there's a difference between the sugar and the sodium. So the sugar recommendation is in grams. It's a higher amount because we can eat higher amounts of, like, we need more carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Those we eat in larger, like, gram quantities, while sodium is a mineral. So we only need it in really small amounts. So milligram is the units that we're using for sodium. So there's a difference between the gram and the milligram. So don't get confused by that. So yeah, so milligrams of sugar is in 1 teaspoon. So it'd be 4 grams of sugar in 1 teaspoon, which is 4,000 milligrams. But again, it's just because the units are different between sugar and sodium. Does that make sense? Okay. And then we have another question. Can you talk about what training a naturopathic doctor has? And so naturopathic doctors have a similar amount of training as a medical doctor. It's just a little bit different. So it would be after a bachelor's degree. It's a 4-year medical program, and they emphasize more whole body medical training. So focusing on nutrition, focusing on herbal remedies, focusing on more like lifestyle interventions like stress reduction and sleep and that kind of thing. They use more, sometimes they'll use drugs, but they do more things like dietary supplements for people who have deficiencies. And so they're trained less in drugs and surgeries. They're more holistic with looking at the whole body, they're trained in nutrition as well. So it's a similar program in that they still do clinical work. And so they're trained for 4 years, just like a medical doctor. And then they do a residency, just like a medical doctor, where they go and do actually clinical training. So it's very similar. It's just the teachings are different and the focus on the healing is a little different. And they focus more on preventative medicine as well. In your experience, do insurance
last two questions.
Okay. In your experience, do insurance companies cover naturopathic doctors? It depends on the insurance company. I would say definitely not as much as medical doctors are. And it also depends on the state. So some states recognize naturopathic doctors exactly the same as medical doctors. And so those states, they tend to have more insurance coverage. But for the most part, you're probably going to be paying out of pocket for that. And that is changing. That, like in politics, they're trying to change the insurance coverages for those doctors as well. So I know it's something that they're trying to get changed. So maybe you can help with that somehow. Okay, and then final question. If high amounts of sodium and sugar are bad for our bodies, what do you recommend meals should be mostly composed of? Should it be mostly fruits and vegetables? So this is a great question, and it's a very complicated question. I will first say that there's not one perfect diet. So everybody seems to, different foods seem to be good for different people. I think the number one recommendation I can make is to eat a whole food diet. So cooking a lot of foods yourself, eating a lot of foods that the ingredients. So if you're eating mostly packaged foods, processed foods, those are going to be the ones that are high in sugar, high in sodium, and generally lower in vitamins and minerals, the nutrients that your body needs. And so I get into this a lot with the class that I teach, human nutrition. We talk all about the difference between processed foods and whole foods. But basically, if you can pick it out of the ground, if you can take it directly from an animal and eat it, those are going to be really natural food sources. So eggs, meat, vegetables, cheeses, fruit, and that kind of thing. Those are going to be the foods that are not processed, that are just natural out of the ground. They're not going to have preservatives or additives or flavorings or colorings or all these things that can be a problem. So beyond making any particular dietary recommendation, I would say eat as naturally as possible, and your body will be able to handle those nutrients a lot better, and they'll be much more nourishing for the body. Does that answer your question? Okay, great.
Great. I want to thank all of you guys for coming. You fit an amazing topic into an hour, so that was awesome. I feel like I learned a lot about nutrition, so I'm definitely going to be watching what I eat. Chicken, or vegetables. But
right.
I hope everybody enjoyed today. I hope going into Thanksgiving holiday, you enjoy yourself and you stay safe, and you have a great weekend on top of that. So without anything else, if there's no other questions or anything like that, or if Megan doesn't have anything else, I release everybody to have a great weekend.
Thank you all for having me, and thanks for the great questions. Feel free to email me if you have any other questions, and I'll give you this the presentation, Amanda, if you want to.
Okay, yeah, I will share that out. Yep.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye.